Marcus's career in the field of aging spans over 2 decades, providing leadership and influence on local, national and global levels. As Australia's leading international advocate on aging, he regularly addresses the issue at the United Nations. He's chairman of the Global Aging Network and member of the governing committee of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Older Persons. Amongst all of that, Marcus has written and published the book Booming, a life-changing philosophy for aging well, which is described as an inspiring, achievable and essential guide for people of all ages that will help us fulfill our potential to live well at a time when it matters most. So enough from me, Marcus. I'm going to turn off my sharing and I'm going to turn off my video and hand over to you. Welcome.
Right. Thank you very much, Christine. And good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for making the time to be a part of our conversation this morning. I'd also want to thank the team at Randwick Library for convening the webinar today. It's wonderful that we can use this sort of platform to still communicate and come together for a discussion like today, which otherwise we would do in person. So hopefully at some stage in the future, we can come together in person and have another conversation about positive aging. I might just check, Christine, that I'm on the video. Can you just confirm that for me? Yes, yep, terrific.
I think
so
you are.
What I really want to share with you today is my firm belief that we all have the potential to age successfully, or as I like to call it, to boom. And I formed that belief over the last 25 years or so through the people I have had the fortune of working with in Australia and across all parts of the world, and also the older people I've had the great fortune to get to know and to learn from and to observe as to why some people have really aged positively and aged successfully, and perhaps also identifying why others haven't been so successful in their aging. So again, it's really my pleasure to share with you this belief that I have, that we all have the potential to age successfully. And for our conversation today, what I wanted to do was highlight a couple of the key reasons why I have that belief that we have the potential to age successfully, to identify some of the threats to our booming, some things we need to be aware of that may inhibit our ability to pursue successful aging. Importantly, I want to identify and share the secrets for successful aging and the opportunity that comes along with those ingredients to booming. And also to respond to your questions. So as Christine mentioned in the introduction, please feel free to send through your questions as I'm going through the presentation side of our event this morning, and then we can address each of those questions when we come to the Q&A section in a little while. So again, please feel free to send those through while I'm speaking, as well as then any that might come to mind towards the end of the presentation as we kick off the Q&A section. Very much welcome your questions, or indeed your comments. You might want to share some views or experiences that you have as well. What I'd like to move to first is a question that I often ask when we come together in forums like today, and that is, what age are you? And if you ask most people that question, what age you are, the answer will inevitably be a number of some type. Whether that number is accurate or not is up to the person responding, but most times we will answer that question with a number. And that number will be the number of days or years lived. And that clearly is our chronological age. And it's that chronological age which, as a society, we are so fixated on. It's the chronological age which underpins a lot of the stereotypes that surround aging and getting older. It's the form of age which leads to a lot of expectations or reduced expectations in terms of being an older person, and the limitations that we start to impose on other people or start to impose on ourselves that can lead to believing we need to withdraw or participate less in society because we've got to a certain age. And it's really important to understand that there are in fact 3 forms of age, not just chronological age. So the first one is chronological age, the number of days or years lived. The second one is our biological age, which is how our body feels, how we feel physically. And the third one is our psychological age, which is our emotional or mental well-being, how we feel psychologically. And out of those 3 forms of age, there's clearly one of those that we have no control over. And that, of course, is our chronological age. No matter how much we want to adopt anti-aging techniques or come up with different numbers for our aging, we cannot change our chronological age. We can have a large influence, though, over our biological age, so how our body is feeling, and our psychological age, our emotional well-being. And the good news is it's those 2 forms of age which actually have a greater impact on how we feel through later life and our well-being as we get older. So in terms of our biological age, how our body feels, we've learned a lot over the past several years in terms of how we can be doing more to either prevent our body from deteriorating, we can better manage any chronic conditions or ailments that we have, we can be restoring our physical health a lot better than what we used to be able to do. So that ability for us to influence how our body feels is significantly greater now than it used to be because of the knowledge we have, because of the resources we have available. So we can be really having a positive influence in terms of how we feel physically as we navigate through later life. Similarly, with regards to our psychological age, again, we have learnt a lot in recent times about how we can be better nurturing our emotional and mental well-being, both in a preventative sense, as well as in a maintenance perspective in terms of maintaining our emotional well-being, maintaining our mental health, and even restoring or improving our mental well-being, which may have been affected in previous times. So for this concept of the 3 forms of age and the 2 forms of age that we can really have a positive influence over, and that also influence our well-being as we get older, it's one of the first reasons and one of the main reasons why I formed this belief that we can all age successfully. So it's understanding that, yes, there are 3 forms of age. One of them we can't control, but the other 2, our biological age and our psychological age, we can have a really positive influence over, and through that have a really positive impact on our health and well-being as we navigate through later life. I want to move now to looking at the concept of successful aging. And if we went round our group this morning and asked, what are the things that you envisage in your own successful aging? What do you envisage for yourself in your later life? We would get all different sorts of answers in terms of what people want to be doing, where they want to be, the things that they enjoy doing, the pursuits they want to be engaged with, and the relationships they might have, the things that are important to them. And that is the way it should be. We should be having our personal priorities, our personal beliefs dictate what we envisage for ourselves in later life. And it's that reason that successful aging is self-defined. So what I want for my successful aging, or what successful aging looks like for me, will be different to one person, and so on and so on. And so that is another key reason why successful aging is attainable for all of us, because it's my definition of successful aging. It's what I want, it's what I need. So it is attainable because it's my successful aging, the way I define it for myself. It's not for anybody else to prescribe to you what successful aging should look like for yourself, what you should be doing, where you should be, how you should be living your life. It's for you to determine that, for you to decide what successful aging looks like, and for you to pursue it. So irrespective of our health circumstances or our social circumstances, successful aging is self-defined, and therefore it is attainable for all of us. So these couple of key reasons underpin my firm belief that we all have the potential to boom. The 3 forms of age that I just spoke about, and the fact that successful aging is self-defined. It is ours to pursue, it's ours to define for ourselves, and it's ours to attain. The reality for most of us now, given the way we have improved health and what we have learned over the past several decades, is that most of us will enjoy an increased longevity. That is, we are going to live a later life than generations that have come before us. Indeed, most of us will live well into our late 80s and beyond. And it's interesting if we just contemplate that for a moment and reflect on it, and we will realise that through that increased longevity, we will have more of our adult life to live after our 50th birthday than we did before it. And if we reflect further and contemplate that, and we think about all the things that we have done and achieved and experienced in our adult life up until our 50th birthday, careers, marriages, families, travel, all sorts of different adventures and experiences. If we contemplate those, and then we think about, well, if we've got more of our adult life to live after our 50th birthday, then we start to realise we have a choice about that later life. A choice as to whether we really grab hold of it and shape it for ourselves and pursue what we want and pursue what's important to us, or whether we essentially wither away and succumb to the negative stereotypes about getting older, about longer life. And if we realise it is a choice, then we can make the decision to really pursue successful aging, define it for ourselves, and go after it and pursue the things that are important to us. So again, I believe we have the potential to age successfully. There are a couple of key reasons for that. And there is this choice about our later life, about this extended later life most of us are going to have. So as we hold that consideration in terms of the choice that we all have, I want to move to identifying some of the things that we need to be aware of by way of threats to our booming or threats to our successful aging. So I'm just going to share some of these key points on a slide for all of us to follow. So just bear with me for a moment. So there are three key threats to our booming. The first of those is negativity. And so that's the negativity that we might have ourselves, but also it's the negativity that surrounds getting older and aging more broadly across society. And that negativity is underpinned by ageism, which unfortunately is so common right across all areas of community. And indeed, ageism is almost a casual ageism. It's a cultural ageism that we often don't recognise when it's actually happening and our involvement in it ourselves. And I would argue that ageism is in fact the last form of acceptable prejudice. We've seen in past years other forms of prejudice rightly called out, things like sexism and racism and homophobia. I don't suggest they have all been resolved, but they have been called out and have been addressed to a certain extent. Whereas ageism has yet to really be called out, and we're not properly recognising, understanding and addressing this issue of ageism, which sees discrimination against older people. It sees these stereotypes and beliefs that people become of less value because they get to a certain age, that they should stop participating because they get to a certain age. You know, they have less rights and opportunities than the rest of the population. And the consequence of that negativity and that ageism and stereotypes is that it impacts on people's individual view and belief of themselves and view of their own aging journey. And it can be as simple as conversations within families, within workplaces or other community environments where this ageism and discrimination and stereotyping is lived out. And it has that impact on the way people view their own aging and their own capability, their own sense of self-worth. So we need to understand that is a real issue and that it has that impact on people individually. The second threat to our booming is loss of control. And if you asked most people what their major fears or concerns were about getting older, a reduced amount of control or loss of control is always very high up on that list, and understandably so. A loss of control can mean less choices about our future options, less options in terms of where we're going to live, what we're going to be doing, who we're going to be with, pursuits to be enjoying and partaking in. And the threat or the concern about other people making decisions for us in later life, other people making decisions in our best interests. So that is a genuine concern and a genuine threat to our booming. The third issue in terms of a threat to our successful aging is the risk of isolation. So isolation leads to disconnection, becoming disconnected socially, disengaged from community, and becoming lonely. And that then leads to a number of significant health risks, a decrease in our sense of self-worth, our self-confidence, and has a very deleterious effect on our well-being. And we're starting to better understand the threat and the severity of this risk of becoming isolated and lonely, to the extent where in the UK 2 years ago, they appointed for the first time a Minister for Loneliness in their government, because they started to appreciate the impact of this issue of isolation and loneliness, particularly in relation to older people. And as we're seeing more and more people accessing support and services to remain in their own home longer by choice, we need to have this understanding that that comes with the threat of isolation and the threat of loneliness and becoming disconnected. So again, it's something for us to be recognising and considering as we look at our own later life and planning for our later life and defining our successful ageing. So in looking at those three threats to our booming, the good news is that there are 3 silver bullets for each of these key threats. So I want to move now to share with you what I believe are the secrets to booming, the secrets to our successful ageing. And they really come down to positivity, planning, and purpose. Positivity, planning, and purpose. Positivity is obviously the secret to overcoming negativity that surrounds getting older and surrounds aging. And when I talk about positivity, it's not necessarily about skipping down the street with a gleeful smile on your face, although that is fine if that's what you'd like to do. But positivity is really about a daily mindset, a daily outlook on the way we live our lives. And it's something we need to be building up over time. And it then enables us to overcome inevitable setbacks that we will face as we navigate through later life. It enables us to say yes to different opportunities and to doing new things. It helps us build up a bank of self-confidence and self-belief so that we can optimistically look at our future, plan for our future, and embrace opportunities that come our way or that we create for ourselves. And again, positivity is something we want to be underpinning the way we pursue successful aging, the way we live our life at all times, but certainly through later life. The second key ingredient is planning. So planning is the secret to keeping control. Planning sees us maximise our choices and our options as we proceed through later phases of our life journey. And planning is something that is never too early or too late to do. So by that I mean we could be a younger person planning for our later life, and then we continue to adapt and revisit those plans, or we could have 2 weeks to live. But it's still important to plan and control those 2 weeks because it's our future. No matter how long or short it is, it's ours to define for ourselves, it's ours to plan and control and determine what we have, what we experience, and what's contained in our journey. So planning, to put our plans together, we should be tapping into advice where necessary. That might be legal advice in terms of some of the formal things we want to be putting in place for ourselves. It might be financial advice to look at how we best support ourselves financially through our ageing journey. It may be talking to family or trusted people to get their input to the way we plan and look at our future. But irrespective of what advice we get, it needs to be our plan. So our decisions, our plans for our own future. And then it's about communicating to people around us those plans as you see fit, so that family and other loved ones can be supporting what we're pursuing through our later life, through our successful aging journey. And of course, we will update and adapt and amend and change our plans because our circumstances will change at different points. Our preferences will change at different times as to what we want to be doing, what's important to us, and how we want to be living our life as we proceed through later life. So again, planning is really important in terms of retaining control and maximising our choices and options available to us. Our third key ingredient to successful aging is purpose. And purpose is all about engagement and staying engaged with life, staying connected, and avoiding the risk of isolation. So to maintain a sense of purpose, it's important to understand what fuels that sense of purpose for us, what sees us stay engaged, what motivates us, what fuels that self-confidence and sense of self-worth. For some people, it will be staying in work for as long as they possibly can, or staying involved in their business for as long as they possibly can. For others, it's the role they play in their family which fuels that sense of purpose. For others, it might be the roles they play in the community, volunteering activities or other pursuits that fuel that sense of engagement, that sense of self-worth and purpose. So it's important to spend time understanding and reflecting on what are those things that are important to us. What are the relationships that really matter to us? What are the activities, the engagements that we really want to be maintaining, or new ones we want to be pursuing into the future? And we can see then the link in terms of purpose to planning. So we want to be incorporating those things that give us purpose in our plans for the future, so that we are really creating and maximising the opportunities for us to tap into those roles that we play, those activities and pursuits that see us maintain that and develop that sense of purpose. And if we think about these ingredients to positive aging, I'm sure that we will all identify people who we've known in our lives, or perhaps even yourself, who live out these elements to successful aging, and through that are booming and are shining examples of successful aging. And certainly there's many people I've known, both in my working life and personal life, who fit that category as shining examples of positive aging. And one of those people I'd like to introduce you to now is my wife's grandmother, Brenda, who, when in her mid to late 80s, very much had a choice to make in her life. She had lost her husband of over 60 years. She had suddenly lost the youngest of her 5 children to a sudden brain tumour. And after her husband's passing, was left on their property a couple of hours west of Brisbane on her own. Her husband, Marty, had maintained the property, had maintained all their financial and administrative affairs. So Brenda was left with a choice as to whether to stay there and battle on her own, or to move somewhere else. And her family were very much wanting and encouraging, and in fact telling her to move into the city, move into a unit closer to family and be safe. But Brenda had other ideas. And what she chose to do was to stay in her home, on her property, and stay in her community. And over the next 12 to 15 years, she absolutely thrived in that environment. She looked after the property on her own, which included riding the ride-on mower, tending to the animals, including horses and chickens and all manner of different animals on the property there. She set traps to catch the foxes. She looked after all the financial affairs. And she did this on her own in a very successful way. And in addition to what she was doing on her own home and her own property, she was super connected in her local community. She was involved in a number of different community organisations, performing a number of different roles, to the extent where that after she did pass away, the local council named a park in her honour. So Brenda became this shining example of positive ageing, of successful ageing, of booming. And on her 90th birthday and every birthday after that, she would have a large party on her property with all the extended family who would come and celebrate. And this was Brenda arriving on her 95th birthday on the back of a Harley Davidson. And if you asked Brenda her secret to her successful aging, she would say an egg a day and a house with stairs. But I know there was a lot more to it for Brenda in terms of her booming. And really, she was living out this positive planning purpose. She was a very positive person. She was optimistic, and she had a confidence in herself to be able to maintain her lifestyle in her community, on her property. She planned very effectively. She knew she had to learn things to be able to maintain the property and take care of all the financial and administrative affairs. So she planned for what she had to learn. And then she planned very well in terms of how she wanted to live her life in that community, in her environment. And she clearly had this great sense of purpose. Maintaining her lifestyle on the property and in her home gave her that sense of purpose. And her roles within the community gave her that sense of purpose, that sense of self-confidence and self-belief. And she remains to this day a great inspiration to myself and many others who observed the way she lived her life. And again, she wasn't an extraordinary person doing amazing things. She was someone living out her life the way she wanted to. And she pursued her successful aging the way she envisaged it for herself. So the lessons from Brenda and people like her in terms of pursuing successful aging and living in adherence to those key ingredients around positivity, planning and purpose is really spending time, investing time in developing a deeper self-knowledge, a greater knowledge of who we are and what's important to us. So it's important in that regard to reflect on the life we've lived before this particular point or before a later point in our lives, understand who we are and the way we've been living our lives and the things that are important to us. And that then can help shape our thinking and inform our thinking about the future. And that's the other important aspect, is that we are future thinking. We need to be contemplating our future life, and what we want from it. Where do we want to be? Who do we want to be with? What are the things that we're passionate about? What are our personal priorities? And how do we ensure that we are giving time to those, that they are going to be part of our life into the future? What are the relationships that are important to us? What are the relationships that we want to continue nurturing, or perhaps even restoring some relationships from the past that have been fractured or deteriorated somewhat? And when we think about relationships, it's important to understand that the benefit from relationships comes through the quality of those relationships, not necessarily the volume of those relationships. We can have numerous relationships, but those that aren't positive, that aren't having a benefit to us in terms of being engaged and feeling good about ourselves and enabling us to pursue our successful aging, then they're not of value to us. It's really about the quality of relationships where we derive benefit from them in terms of how we live our life and how we can pursue successful aging. And there are things that we can do to help develop that depth of self-knowledge. And as I said before, it's really identifying our priorities, our passions, and our purpose, those things that are going to be of importance to us. They may be continuing to do things we've been doing in the past, or it might be about pursuing new things for the first time. And part of our practice of future thinking, we should include asking ourselves, what is an adventure or an experience I want to have into the future? Is it a travel destination I want to be going after? Is it learning something new for the first time? Is it picking up a hobby or an activity that I used to do that I have dropped off, but I really want to get back involved with? And it's then looking at what's the first step I can take in pursuing those things, and starting to break things down into smaller steps that we can pursue each day as we embark on our successful aging journey. A couple of things I want to share with you before wrapping up the presentation side of conversation this morning. And I'll just share my screen with you again, excuse me. So as Christine mentioned at the outset, my book Booming was released a little while ago, and Booming is really me sharing what I have learned from other people over the past couple of decades, from older people themselves, from people I've had the fortune to work with across the world, and the lessons that they have taught me, the things I have learned from them about getting older, about pursuing successful aging and how we can be doing that well. And there's two main reasons why I chose to write Booming. The first of those is the individual opportunity that I believe we all have to age successfully. That given this increased longevity I spoke about earlier, we do have a choice, but an opportunity to pursue successful aging and to get from later life what we want from it. And the second reason was the responsibility I believe we all have, the collective responsibility to reframe the way aging is viewed across our society, that we can have a much more positive view about older people, about what it means for us to be aging, and that we can, through that more positive approach to aging, enable more people to age successfully. So they're the main couple of reasons why I felt it appropriate to put Booming together and share it with everybody. In my work, we talk a lot about happiness, and I think happiness is something that's difficult to define. But I came across a quote a couple of years ago which really resonated with me in terms of thinking about Booming, about successful aging. So I want to leave this quote with you before I finish the presentation side of our conversation this afternoon. And the quote is that happiness is the joy one feels in the pursuit of their own potential. That happiness is the joy one feels in the pursuit of their own potential. So thank you again for being a part of our conversation this afternoon. Our main points are really understanding the three forms of age. There's chronological age, but there's our biological age and psychological age, which we can really influence. There are three threats to our booming we need to be recognising and addressing. That's the negativity, the loss of control, and the risk of isolation. But really grabbing hold of the three secrets to booming: positivity, planning, and purpose. Thank you very much for being a part of the conversation, and I look forward to your questions and comments through the Q&A section of the webinar. Back to you, Christine. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcus. Normally we'd have a big round of applause, but we haven't figured out how to do that when it's mute and live video is off. But we do have a few questions from the audience. Please continue to send them in. Okay, the first of which has come from Gabrielle. And I'm just going to read it out for you now. The profile of those who perish from COVID-19 is male, and in brackets sadly, elderly and obese. Is exercise an important aspect of aging well?
Thanks very much, Gabrielle, for the question. Absolutely, exercise is crucial to our physical well-being, and our physical well-being has a big influence over our successful aging more broadly. So as I mentioned before, in terms of the three forms of age, our biological age is so important, and it's one we can really have a significant influence over. And our exercise is a key ingredient to that physical health, that physical well-being. So it's important to exercise appropriately, and that's going to differ for different people depending on particular physical circumstances you might have or physical capacities. So we do need to be exercising in the best way possible for us, and you might need to take some advice about that from allied health professionals so that you're doing what's going to be of optimal value to you individually. But absolutely, exercise is crucial, and we should never underestimate our ability to pursue that physical exercise, irrespective of any incapacities we might have. There's always things we can do, irrespective of our health circumstances. We
have another question from Robert. And his question is the United Nations doing anything concrete in the area of aging successfully? Like, are they providing funding for any activities in this area?
Thanks very much, Robert. It's a great question. And there's a yes or no component to the answer. Yes, there is much being done largely through the World Health Organization, and later this year, the WHO will launch their Decade for Healthy Aging, which I think could be a great opportunity at all different levels to better support healthy aging and positive aging. That could be at governmental level from a policy point of view, from a community level in terms of greater awareness about what we should be doing as individuals, as families, as communities to support positive aging and embrace more of a healthy aging approach. Then also from a provider level for organisations involved in the delivery of health and aging services, that they can be doing them better to support people's positive aging. The other part of the answer, though, is that there's a great frustration at the moment from people like myself who've been advocating at the UN for a convention to protect the rights of older people. So we've seen in the past great benefit through conventions to protect the rights of children, of women, of people with a disability. For 11 years now, there's been a battle to try and get an instrument that provides greater support to older people, and it hasn't yet been endorsed by the UN. And when I say the UN, I really mean the member states of various countries who are the decision makers at UN headquarters. So we've been advocating strongly for that for a number of years. I've had a personal involvement there for a number of years as well, and it's been both inspiring and frustrating in terms of the work that's being done, but the lack of commitment from countries, including Australia, to be frank, to really adopt a commitment that will see much more done to support older people and to better support positive aging more broadly.
Thank you. Thanks, Marcus. So we've got another question from Roz. When does positivity fall into Pollyannism? Do we deny reality when things are really tough?
That's a great question, Roz. And I think there is the distinction between the two. And perhaps was referring to the Pollyanna mode when I was talking about skipping down the street with a gleeful smile on your face. Being positive is not being blissfully ignorant, and quite the contrary. And I used the example of Brenda before, where being positive does not mean you dismiss the realities, or that you dismiss the negativity that might be happening, or that you will have challenging times. We will all have different setbacks. It could be setbacks in terms of our individual health, or the loss of loved ones, or a change in environmental circumstances around us. It could be the loss of our job, or whatever it might be. We are going to have these different setbacks, and we're going to have days and periods where we're not feeling great, we're not feeling positive. And I think the poll at the start of this webinar was indicative of that we had some people feeling great, some people feeling good, some people feeling okay. But if we have this underpinning positive outlook, then we are positioned to overcome those setbacks. We are positioned to overcome the times when we do feel a bit down, or we're lacking a bit of confidence, we've got some self-doubt. It's that underpinning positivity which allows us to move past those periods and hold on to our self-belief, tap into our self-confidence that we can pursue the things that we want, that we can attain what we want for our own successful aging. So absolutely, positivity is about acknowledging all that's going on, all that's around us, be it good, bad, or indifferent, but taking that knowledge and forging ahead.
Thank you. We have another question from, I hope I pronounced names correctly, Marcela Garcia. It's easy to plan the future and have a purpose when things are easy. What would you recommend when your personal situation is difficult, such as a controlling partner, young children, lack of support, non-English speaker? How do you keep personal priorities, planning, purpose, etc., when it seems to you don't have much control over your future?
Thanks, Marcelo, for a fantastic question, and I think one that people need to be willing to ask this sort of question more readily. So I appreciate you sharing that question. There's a couple of thoughts about that. One is we need to recognise the value of small steps and what might seem small things to do, which actually really do fuel our sense of purpose, our sense of control. So it is planning for those, whether it's a particular interaction we want to have, whether it's information we want to be accessing, whether it's something you want to be doing independent of those who might be controlling. So it is planning for those, and often when we talk about plans, we're thinking large scale, 3 years ahead or whatever, and that's fine. That's important to do as well. But planning is also about what's happening tomorrow, and what's something I want to get out of tomorrow. Whether it's a conversation with somebody, whether it's phoning a friend I haven't spoken to for a long time, whether it's sourcing some information which is going to help me better increase my options or my choices. And in regards to getting support, there are different agencies, different networks that are available to provide advice or support or to advocate for you if you are in a challenging or a troubling circumstance. So, and that includes where there might be some language or cultural diversity which needs to be supported. So there's an older person's advocacy network which has got a range of different services and options that might be a good starting point depending on your circumstance. And certainly happy to advise offline if there's something more personal that could be of assistance. But there are avenues to go down to get confidential advice and support to help you navigate what might be a challenging circumstance personally.
Thank you. We have another from Walter. He says, great talk. Thanks, Margaret. Wondered if you could speak to the issue big cities have as one of the threats to aging well. As a mid-50s single creative, no kids, I found that much of my social circle has had to leave the city because of affordability issues, and thus longer-term friendships have been really impacted. Building the depth of newer friendships is always challenging.
Thanks, Walter, for the positive feedback, and thanks for the question. And yes, that is it's a really insightful question, and it comes to the point about isolation, that we could be living in the most densely populated parts of Australia, but yet be really isolated and feeling disconnected. There's a couple of things that I think are relevant to your question. A quick one in regards to friendships that might have been affected by geographic distance, so people who had to move away. I think it's being open to tapping into different ways of staying connected with people. So, whether it's phone calls, social media platforms, or virtual connectivity, which obviously a lot more people have been doing through the COVID-19 circumstances. But in regards to where you're living, and there are great avenues to pursue within our local community to be connected, and our libraries are a great platform for that, to identify interest groups that might be relevant to us, and through those, connecting with those interest groups, forging relationships with people and friendships with people who've got those shared interests. Other community organisations who, again, provide that platform to tap into things that are of interest to us that we can pursue, and then again connect with people through those shared interests. So libraries are a great source of not just the activities they run, but accessing that sort of information, talking to people who can advise about what is happening in your local community, which is great because it means things aren't far away from you, that you can access quite easily. And then again, other people who are participating will also be in your local area, and easier to stay connected with them. And of course, the internet provides a plethora of information too, in terms of what's happening in your area. And again, if you're willing to, that there are those interest groups that you can connect with through the internet, and again, develop relationships with people who have got that shared interest. So there are avenues for us to pursue there, and they can be very local, which is always preferable.
Thanks, Max, and I promise we didn't that plug. Thank you very much. Okay, we have an anonymous question. I was disturbed by some views of younger people expressed lately in the media that life and the economy has stopped for the majority of society in order to protect the elderly. This deeply shocked my confidence and value of my life. How can we combat this view?
It's another very astute question, and it's certainly concerned myself and others involved in ageing over the last few weeks. It's been really prevalent in other parts of the world and in the US and parts of Europe where the death rate has been much higher. There's been disturbing examples of neglect of older people. For example, in the UK, it was only over the last week or so they started to include the deaths of people in aged care in their list of fatalities through COVID-19. In many parts of the US, there's been great difficulty in sourcing basic resources and services for older people, through the COVID situation. There's certainly been some commentary in Australia along the lines of that question. Fortunately, it's been balanced out by those who've got a more insightful view, and I think that's been positive to see the balanced commentary. And I think our governments have taken good decisions in that regard as well, that they have put the health and well-being of all members of our community at the forefront, and then looking at how we can manage the economy on the back of that. So I have taken heart in decisions from our leaders. I think the exposure of that ageism that's been demonstrated by some in their commentary is hopefully a healthy thing, that through that exposure, we will have the rest of society in greater solidarity to address issues of ageism and address issues of discrimination. And my observation early in the COVID-19 situation was that it actually brought the interests and the issues affecting older people to the forefront more than they normally are. And again, I'm hopeful that on the back of that, we will see both our governments and society better address these issues that affect the interests of older people.
Thank you. We just have a comment as one of the more final questions. So if you've got a question, you've got another minute or so. A few people have written in to say thank you for a great event and that they very appreciate your time. So the last comment, or there might be a couple more questions that flow in. This anonymous person has said, mine isn't a question, but sharing what I've discovered since retiring. Firstly, many gyms run programs for the elderly. I attend UNSW gym, which offers fabulous programs, exercise and aqua. Secondly, local councils, community groups and libraries run a lot of activities for elderly at reduced prices. These offer an excellent starting point and help in developing a community of like-minded people. Thirdly, lots of elderly travel around the countryside. I've done it as a single older woman, so thank you for that comment. Marcus, if you wanted to add to that in any way.
Just briefly, I think it's a great sharing of the opportunity that is there to use facilities, resources, and advice about nurturing our physical well-being, and also understand that going to gyms or some of those communal environments isn't for everybody, and there are still great opportunities to tap into different avenues for exercise and that advice which are more suitable to you. So again, it's about identifying what our personal preferences are and then accessing the opportunities that are aligned with what we're most comfortable with, what we would prefer.
Thank you. There's just one other question. Should people be trying to work as long as they can?
That's very much an individual question. So I've certainly know people who it was critical for them because of how they developed their sense of purpose and engagement. It was critical for them to keep working for as long as they possibly could. For others, though, they have managed a very successful transition from working life to post-career, and they planned for that and they've embraced that, and they have got other ways of staying engaged and maintaining that sense of purpose. So it's very much about knowing what's important to you and then pursuing that. So again, there's no, it shouldn't be prescribed by other people as to what you should be doing. It's identifying what's important for you and then pursuing that and what's going to give you that sense of purpose. I think for those who do want to keep working for as long as possible, one aspect to consider is being open to modified roles. So if there's an employer that's hopefully flexible and open to that, It might be a good way of retaining your involvement for longer in the workplace. But again, it comes back to personal preferences.
Thank you. And I think, sorry, Walter has another mention. Cheers. Sorry, we can't all be together for the talk. Let's embrace and celebrate all the Brendas in our lives in the meantime. Thank you, Walter. And then I think we've got time for one more question, and another few thank yous have come in. Marcus will share those individually. What is your advice about getting the best aged care if needed for family members?
So in regards to aged care, I'd re-emphasise the point about planning. And I know nobody really wants to plan for their aged care or contemplate needing aged care, but there is great value in some of that scenario planning with your loved ones about, well, if I need X. So if it's potentially looking at home-based aged care or eventually residential aged care, we should be contemplating where do we want to be receiving that care. So is the location important to us? That location might be staying in our own community or moving closer to family and other people who support us. Who's the sort of provider that we would be comfortable with? So doing our research around the different providers in those locations, who's reputable, whose values are aligned to mine, and really understanding the options in that regard, and who's got the scope of services that is aligned to my personal preferences. And then it is looking to test those options. So if you're looking to move, say, to a retirement village or to residential aged care, it's spending time in those places and getting feedback from people who've got direct experience. So people you know who've lived there, people you know who've worked there, really looking past the marketing and advertising blurbs and getting some genuine feedback about those places, because there are really great providers out there, but there's a range. So you want to be making sure you're getting the best ones, and the best way to maximise your choices and options is planning and looking ahead as much as possible to identify what you'd want and who you'd want it from and where you'd want it, and then informing family or other loved ones about that so that they can be supporting your choices if that need eventuates in the future.
Thank you. Well, that concludes the talk. Thank you, Marcus, for your time. Hang on while I bumble away here. So just a reminder, if you all enjoyed hearing from Marcus and his expert advice on aging well, you can purchase his book in physical form from our long-time author event supporting bookseller Constant Reader. We'll post a link up in the chat box shortly, or you will find it in the reminder emails we've sent you from Eventbrite about this event today. There's also a link to purchase an ebook version if that's your preference too, especially. I mean, I was speaking with Jay from Constant Reader this morning. Despite it saying it'll take 7 to 10 working days, it probably will take a little bit less, unless you would like to arrange a signed copy, which we can facilitate. You'll just need to get in contact with us and we can make that happen. But we would ask, if you are interested in a signed copy, that you get in touch with us by 5 o'clock tomorrow. So that's Wednesday, the 6th of May. Just to plug what's coming up next, we're supporting the Bad Sydney Crime Festival Bad All Year event with Candice Fox tomorrow night. We're not actually running it, but we are supporting it. So Candice actually used to write her books in the Lionel Bone Library, and we had the pleasure of having her speak to us just before she gave birth, actually, last year. So do join that online. You can find out how to do that via our Facebook page, or you can just Google Bad Sydney Crime Writers Festival and you'll find the details there. We'll also be talking to Suzanne Leal. It's a bit of a crime fest, actually. Sorry, Marcus, tag on your event. So Suzanne Leal, who is also a local author, we were meant to have an event with her live in our Malabar branch, but sadly COVID-19 had other plans for that. but we will welcome her online on the 3rd of June, a similar event like we facilitated today. And if you're interested in what else we've got coming up, please do check out our library calendar. You'll see there's Marcus's talk. I screenshot this yesterday. And so anything that we've got coming up, you'll find there, or sign up to our e-newsletter. The final thing we have to do today is just to get your feedback. So I'm just going to post up a little poll. If I can figure out how to do that. Sorry, I knew I'd bumble a bit. And I will just pop this up. And if you could all please rate your satisfaction today, we'd really appreciate it. And I'll just leave that open for a few minutes. Thank you, Marcus. Have a lovely rest of your day. Really appreciate your time. And I suppose if anyone has anything more to say, they can contact us and we will forward that, any questions on if there was anything that you found that you needed to ask after the event. But without further ado, I'll leave this poll open for just a bit longer, and I'll sign off. And thanks again, Marcus.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the time.
Bye-bye.